Hi, everyone. It's Lisa from Been There, Got Out, and I am thrilled to have today's guest on. He's one of the therapist unicorns that really does understand some of the dynamics in these high conflict relationships, whether it's you're going through the divorce or the post divorce with the general co parenting. And I know that so many people here are really, really concerned about their kids and the impact that the whole conflict has on the kids. And I know we all feel like we should just send our child to therapy to fix them. But as something that one of the things that Chris and I have learned in the past couple of years is that it's not really just the child that needs to be fixed. It's the entire family's dynamics that has to be examined and worked on. So before you introduce yourself today, Adam, how important is it during divorce to actually consider the family dynamics rather than just giving a child therapy?
Hi, Lisa. It's a great first question. I think when we are looking at this, looking at the child versus looking at the dynamic, we would be pathologizing the child. We would be more or less targeting the child as if that child's behavior is the thing that needs to be treated, and we wouldn't be looking at the context for that behavior. When we think of this as a trauma informed care perspective, then we look at the child's behavior as normal in an abnormal environment instead of being abnormal in what we're assuming is a normal environment, especially in a high conflict divorce. That environment can be unsafe, it can be toxic, it's pathological. So the child's behaviors that we're seeing that typically bring into therapy as outside of normal as they are probably normal given what's going on in the family dynamics. So it would be dangerous, I'm going to say, to that child to not look at the family dynamic and just try and treat the behaviors.
It's almost like saying to the child who's already blaming him or herself, well, you're the problem.
Yeah, it would be so invalidating. So this child is growing up. Imagine growing up in a family where everybody is yelling all the time, and maybe there's different forms of aggression, and you're being told, and if a therapist comes in and starts targeting your behavior, you're really being told then that you're the problem, right? That it's not these things versus, you know, taking a therapist coming in and seeing what's going on and validating the child, like saying, okay, so, let me understand why you're doing these things. And it comes out in the conversations that they're sharing. Some of the behavior may be learned, some of these may be protective factors or reactions to what's going on in the family. And you can't get that if all we're doing is, having somebody here fix my child
Hmm.
without taking into consideration all those things that are going on. And especially if it's, if there's two homes and there's this degree of pathology or if it's high conflict, that's a really significant piece.
Yeah. So now, Adam, can you officially introduce yourself and say who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name is Adam Barta. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I started this practice, Head in the Right Direction Counseling Services, in 2008 when I had my first son. And we have grown to, we have about 22 therapists in 7 different offices. We have clinical supervisors now that have allowed me to step back. Uh, and we have licensed clinical social workers, licensed mental health counselors, licensed marriage and family therapists. We have a very strong intern program in each of those fields. So it's a thing that's allowing us to continue to grow. We I started this because I wanted to be able to provide as mental health to as many services to as many people as possible and make it as accessible as possible. So we went through the trouble that we're credentialed with Medicaid, Medicare, all the insurance companies. Like there's things to be able to do this because not everybody can afford a $300 an hour therapist.
Yeah.
So for us, our mission is really to try and make this as accessible as possible.
And it's so necessary
Yeah.
at this time and also in these kinds of situations that our community deals with. So, speaking of that, how does a therapist tell what kinds of interventions are necessary? Like, say you meet a family for the first time and you just know that they're dealing with conflict, but how do you know what to do, or does it take several weeks?
It's a great question. I encourage anybody who's doing this work. Now, when we're doing work with just regular people coming in for therapy, it's the same thing. But I want to say more so when we're working with a high conflict separation or divorce. because there's so many different puzzle pieces. So if we're just doing regular, therapy, we encourage just like a puzzle approach. Every piece, every session, you're going to get another piece of the puzzle that's going to help you to understand who this is, or what this thing in front of you is, what the problem may be, or how this person sees the world. And only when you have a great enough confidence, enough puzzle pieces, if you will, that you think you know what you're working with, then potentially, collaborate to make some interventions. In a high conflict divorce, it's that process takes a long time because there's lots of different perceptions of what this thing is. Each partner has their own perception of what this is. Each child in the family has their perception of what this thing is. So it may take a long time to get an accurate picture. And each person is offering the puzzle pieces that they want you to see, but sometimes you need the ones that are not obvious or not being reported. So it's very challenging. Up front, I would say that the biggest interventions is to try and safety of the child is where we would start. That's always the paramount, and then we would take it from there. And I think in those cases, there's some easy enough things that we can do, but it is really it takes a while for effective interventions in this work to be developed, and it's very unique because it's not all cases are high conflict. Not all high conflict are reciprocal. In other words, sometimes you have somebody where there's one parent who's got a high degree of personality pathology, and the other one who's sort of adaptive. So it really runs the full spectrum.
Yeah. So speaking of that, one of the issues we see all the time with our clients is when one parent doesn't want the child or the family to get therapy. They say, it's not a problem at my house. I don't want to do it. I don't want anything to do with them, and I don't trust them. How do you
Mhm.
deal with a situation like that?
That's a tough one, because a lot of the times there's something that they have a preconceived notion about what therapy is, or they are burned out because they maybe have had outside agency involvement before, so it's threatening to them. Maybe they had somebody come in, maybe CPS or something like that, and they lost custody. So for them, any outside agency or any outside agent is potentially threatening. So you're really going up against that. We try and engage, all of our therapists will try to engage both parties, in a genuine manner, not just a checkbox, because sometimes that's the case, but in a real genuine manner to try and collaborate. But it's the case, not all the time, that it happens where you'll have one parent that doesn't want to collaborate or engage. So we work with the agents, the parties that are willing to do the work, that are willing to come in a case, if it rises to the level with the law guardian will potentially advocate to have this person, compel this person to meet. Those are not always the ideal cases. We are not um, equipped to deal with situations where there's a high degree of pathology on both parties, and because for that you really need a program where there's multiple therapists assigned to the same family who collaborate and have accountability to the court. There are programs out there, and they're fantastic. I don't know that there's many in New York. You'll see if you can research and see where they are, but they need the resources, they need grants, they need county cooperation to be able, and support to be able to be introduced. I don't see that. We're down here in Westchester, it's a little bit more collaborative. The further north you go, potentially the less resources that go to this. It's not an issue that affects everyone, so unfortunately, it doesn't get the resources that it needs.
Yeah, one of the things as you were talking that I started thinking about is one of our clients in particular, but this is a theme again throughout our community where let's say there is family systems therapist, there's a team of people involved, and the child is having all these issues, and some of it still, and there's therapists that are making recommendations, and one parent is following the recommendations, and the other parent is not, and almost like making things worse. So for example,
Mhm.
with phones, or where there's a whole treatment plan that everybody gets involved with and creates to help the child stop being as tied to the phone, and then they go to the other parent's house who just completely ignores it. Is
Mhm.
that the kind of thing you're saying is also obviously really, really hard? And is there anything that advice you could give to someone in that situation where their ex is just not following what everybody's saying would really help the child?
Right, and on the continuum, and not to minimize that, but that feels more on while it is a thing, there's much larger um, violations, if you will, of an agreement that go forward without accountability from the court. It doesn't happen. And I would
Hmm.
encourage people, please, not that we are our own attorneys, but you can use ChatGPT now, you can use other AI resources to look up court cases where they did hold either an alienating parent or a violating parent accountable in the court. It's almost like a PINS, if you will, the PINS process for
Hmm.
children, or even like a probationary experience where the parent who's committing these violations are held accountable in front of the court. They use talking parents or other apps, so the communication becomes admitted into the court. They will access the law guardian who's meeting with the child. They will access clinical records and any evidence that what you're mentioning is potentially something that's done outside of the scope. But then you see there's larger behaviors, alienating behaviors, turning the kid against the other parent, those kind of things. They start to be held accountable. But unless it is brought to the in a way, and the court is receptive to addressing these things, it's a very difficult thing to prove. It's a difficult thing to have addressed. But it does happen. And there are court cases where this level of accountability is done.
That's very hopeful, especially coming from your perspective, because people often feel lost and they'll just say, I don't know what to do. But to hear that you can file for something, maybe even just legal decision making regarding medical and mental health, and really holding your ex accountable, because them not following a treatment plan is harming your child. That does affect the child's safety.
Yeah, you can also have what's called a co-parenting plan. If you've heard of those, a
No,
co-parenting
tell me.
plan. It's a great document. So it's not necessarily a legal document, but it is a collaborative document that really addresses things like decision making for medical, for religion. It can include how we're supporting our behavior modification program at home if we have one. School decisions. It really outlines where in a
Okay. Oh,
collaborative
parenting plan. Okay. No,
right, a
we know what a
co-parenting plan.
parenting plan is. I thought you were going to say something to add in terms of a co-parenting plan, like consequences for if
Oh
someone's not following the
boy,
basic
oh boy, that would
agreement.
be something if everybody
Would it?
signed up to it. Yeah, I just if we can get the level of accountability just to be something where they would consider it, I think that in itself would have value. But it's a
Yeah.
hard
Yeah.
thing.
I
You
agree.
shared with me what you guys are doing over there, and I love the idea that you could actually engage parents in those. I think you said you were running groups, and where a parent can actually be challenged on their own behavior, and because that's always the hardest thing I think for a parent to come in and see their role in this. That's such a hard thing. Who wants
Hmm.
to when parents are in these high conflict separations, it's so much easier to target this other person and say that they are the problem, they are the thing, than it is to know. And I have to believe this in the majority of cases, unless, outside of significant organic, something going on psychologically, substance abuse, etc., that they didn't have any role. If we only when we can see our own role in a thing can we begin to change it. And I think that part of the groups that you have does that, where you are actually able to help people come in and see through their anger, through their hurt, to be able to say, okay, how do I best help my child? So I think that came up for me just thinking about the topic that we're talking about, the work that you're doing.
Yeah. Now, Adam, and I'm thinking about, I think it was you. Were you talking about something called the drama triangle?
Yes.
Tell us what the drama triangle is.
Okay. This is Karpman. It's there's when somebody experiences trauma, real trauma, they will typically it'll affect how they see the world. And for them now, moving forward, they will see the world through three roles, where people in the world will either be a perpetrator, a hero, or a victim. And they will cast this. And any time when there's a high degree of conflict, so I think for a healthy person, there's a conflict, and we may say, let me see what's going on. Let me understand this better. There's no automatic casting, if you will, of
Hmm.
myself in any of those roles. We're going to try and see what's going on and try and resolve. For someone who has experienced significant trauma, they are automatically casting roles. For them, they're either going to cast themselves as the victim and the other parent as a perpetrator, and then some external agency as a hero, or potentially even their child as a hero.
Hmm.
And in doing so, it really blurs the boundaries, it blurs roles, and it creates these narratives that just create more drama.
Yeah. And it teaches the child to start doing that same
Yes,
black
to
and
see
white
the
thinking.
world exactly. So they start to see the world through this lens of if you are one of these things in my life and their interactions.
Yeah. Actually, I'm thinking we had a client who we've seen for years that she's been divorced for almost 10 years at this point. And it's still like a lot of this drama is happening. And she actually just had a victory because it involved something regarding a major decision. And we know that her ex needs to feel like a hero. And so this thing came up and we said, just she said I need to, and she also feels this, we call it like the superhero complex, where she wants to come in and like save things, and we said just hold back, just hold back, because if you go in and act like how act show how important this decision is to you, you're going to lose. Like your ex is not going to do it just to spite you. So if you can just restrain yourself and let your ex play the hero, it's going to happen. And it did. So it's interesting how people also cast themselves in those roles too,
Mhm.
not
Well, they're
just
going to
in
put
the world
themselves, they
like
don't
that.
always put themselves in the role of the victim. Sometimes they're going to put themselves in the role of the hero because he doesn't want to go like that. So, yeah, it's okay. I just want to take a pause for a minute and just sort of,
Yep.
we can do that.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Okay. Thank
Go
you
ahead.
so much.
Get up and do what you have to do.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, it's going by pretty quick.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah,
Right?
thank you. I just need to stress that out a little bit.
Okay. All right. Tell me when you're ready.
Okay.
Okay. So starting again, what are some misconceptions that you've seen that parents have when dealing with their children in the midst of these divorces or difficult co-parenting situations?
I think certainly that this is somehow separate from the kids is a big misconception that they're going to be able to do this and it's not going to have any impact on the kids.
Mm,
I think that's a real misconception. And my hope is that parents will try to keep the conflict separate from the kids. Unfortunately, in a high conflict, there's always spillover. And if we look at the research shows it's not the divorce or the parents separating that actually has psychological impact on the children as they grow older. It's the high conflict behaviors,
mhm,
the manipulations that interfere with that child's attachment system and how they carry out relationships as they get older. So one that misconception that the children are separate from this, I think also that they can have their child or that their child should see their partner the same way that they do. That's a really big and
mhm,
poisonous misconception. I think for parents, and I can understand that. Look, if I see that there's a kid that my son wants to hang out with that might not be the greatest influence, I might have certain feelings about that and not want my kid to be exposed to that. But this is different than that. This is, outside of significant abuse, as I said, and there are cases where, the other parent has really engaged in just, toxic pathological things that they need to get help with. Obviously, that needs to happen. In the absence of it, this is the only other person in the world that's going to love this kid the way that we do. Everybody
mhm,
else, our parents, our grandparents, everybody's going to love it. But in terms of having that biological, that genetic imprint on this kid. This is you two are it, and I think that helps or should help parents to keep that in mind when we're going through this because it's going to harm that child. If our child has to take on our view of our ex, it doesn't allow them any longer to have the relationship with them that they had. It doesn't allow them any further to individuate, which is a very necessary developmental
mhm,
task. It doesn't allow them to individuate from peer pressure as they get older. It doesn't allow them to individuate from any kind of pressure in a relationship as they get older because they're being taught and told you have to see this person the way that I do, even if it goes against what your real genuine experience is. Right. So that, and then that child, they don't feel safe. It's no longer safe for them to comfortably say, oh yeah, mom and I did this or dad and I did that. And, and we think that we are, doing, helping the child somehow so that they see this thing that we see, but they have to be allowed to see that person through their own lens. So I think
yeah,
that's another misconception is this idea that our kids have to see that we have to protect them by showing them how terrible this other person is. All we're doing is really we're doing so much damage.
yeah. I'm glad you're noting that, because that idea is huge in our community, where people are like, when is my kid going to see how bad their other parent is?
Hmm. And the
And
other part, they may not present the same way. They're going to have a very different relationship with the child than they do with us, right? So there's got to be room for that. They're not the same person to that child as they are to us. They may not have hurt that child the way that we were hurt.
yeah, I think there's a lot of fear that if someone is an abusive partner, that they're going to be an abusive parent, though.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's tricky.
And my
What?
hope is, as this is, there's a collaborative approach that would be a thing if it is a genuine thing that's addressed.
Yeah, yeah. So speaking of that, with wanting your child to see how bad your ex is, and what about like some behaviors that people do unconsciously? I mean, I can think of a couple that we see, which
Hmm.
starts kind of turning the child against that other parent and making them feel like their other parent is bad. And they kind of
Hmm.
do that splitting where it's like, well, this parent's good and this parent is bad.
So can certainly list lots of behaviors that they do that manifest externally, but I think it's more valuable to consider the thing that they're doing internally, because that's what's driving all those external behaviors. An example would, so the internal thing is a story that we are allowing ourselves to tell ourselves about the other parent. So if I'm allowing myself to demonize this other parent and that there's no good in that other parent, then anytime it comes up in front of my child, even if I say nothing, so my child says, "Oh yeah, I had a good time at mommy's house." If I pause, if I sigh, if I roll my eyes, I haven't said a word, but I
Hmm.
have now signaled to my child that this is not something either that I want to hear or that's safe to talk about or that you should be comfortable talking to.
It's
And
unacceptable.
right, right. In some way, we're sharing that you talking about this other parent, you having a relationship with this other parent, hurts me, ails me. Look at my face.
Mm.
We didn't even say a word, and we're not even. This doesn't have to be even deliberate. Now, there are some parents that they'll do this purposefully to try and communicate to this child. The thing I'm hoping, and we're shooting for the people who are really looking to try and change and help this process along, just to be aware that the stories that we allow ourselves to tell ourselves about this other parent are going to manifest in ways that we are not in control. So it behooves us to change those stories. We don't have to think of this person as the best thing in the world, but I think it would help, instead of having it all poison, to put some things in there. We have to recognize that this other person, that there are, to humanize them. We have to humanize. If we don't humanize them, then we are going to allow ourselves to engage in a series of campaign of denigration, unconditional detachment. Like we're really going to be, and we're going to put our kids through this, and that's going to disrupt our kids' attachment system. That thing is, our attachment systems are very resilient. They don't really fracture unless there's a huge force being put upon it. When this happens, especially if we are going to break an attachment between a child and the parent, this is the strongest one and the one that models for all the relationships. We're not damaging that child's attachment system for joining in new relationships as they get older, with friendships, with romantic partners, in a spousal relationship. That person, they won't have that. They won't have the ability to do it in a healthy way. Maybe if they get some help, and it's always going to be a thing that their programming was fractured because we did not do this thing. We were not careful about how we acted, of the stories that we allowed ourselves to have, and how that our kids witnessed that. So the things in terms of what they're going to manifest, as I said, those are a very small thing, just an eye roll, a hesitation, uh, not asking in a friendly way if they want to talk about it. Other things are, you can shut it down. You can, anytime that the other partner's name comes up, you make negative overtures, all the way to the other end of the campaign, where there's, or the campaign of denigration, all the way on the other end of the spectrum, where this child knows. If your child knows how much anger that you have about your partner, that's a real flag. They shouldn't know this.
Mm. Yeah. When you say anger, I'm also thinking about fear, because we were just dealing with someone the other day who she's been separated from her ex for years, and they have these two kids, and the ex was out of the picture for a while and is trying to get back in. And this person is saying, I cannot let him be around the girls alone. And we said, well, that, do you have any evidence of anything, like that he's done something to the kids? No, I don't, but I'm really scared. And, the police have been involved. And I just was like, and now my kids are really scared. My kids are terrified. And I kept thinking, this is going to be an issue, because this parent's fear, with no basis that she can show to any third party, she could end up losing custody because of this, like, failure to recognize that, without evidence like that, if someone is trying to be a parent and there's been no danger that's been shown, especially if they're meeting in a public place, that could really harm her case, as well as the relationship. And her daughters, what you're saying about the attachment is so important, and fractured attachment, not just affecting that parental relationship, but all their future relationships.
Yeah.
That's really significant.
And that's a really hard thing to be up against, is your own fear of what will happen. But
Hmm.
when we fear a thing, it's not that we fear the thing happening, it's that we fear what we will have to do if the thing happens. So if there's a way to kind of see through that perhaps she's afraid of what she'll have to do if something happens. Maybe she'll have to face a thing in her mind of what I'm going to need to do now for the girls. But if that thing doesn't happen, if there is like you're saying, if there's a lack of evidence, we have to hold that uncomfortable space to allow it to happen.
Yeah, it's really tricky. And also, when you're talking about the importance of humanizing the other parent, I was thinking about an exercise that we always do with our clients when they have to present to an evaluator, and or sometimes at a deposition. And one person said the other day, "What do I do if they ask if my ex is a good parent?" I said, "Oh, this is perfect. Like, let's talk about what you would say." Because we know one of the most important custody factors is which parent is likely to support that child's relationship with the other parent. So can you list two things about that person as a human being and as a parent that they do well? And some clients are really good at this. They're like, I get it, and they can do it. Others, they have such a hard time thinking of anything, anything good about that other parent. We're like, we better start, like, going back in time and thinking about what attracted you to this person. There
Right.
must have been something, even if it's fake, even if you think it's awful, that you can say about this human being, because your child is half that person. So, for example, in my own case, whatever feelings I have towards my ex, I can easily say that one thing that he did that was amazing was he loved to read, and I love to read. And I was so excited when we first got together, because I knew that he would support our love of reading towards our children, and that every night he read to my son. I was able to read to my daughter, and our kids grew up loving to read. My daughter, not as much now. She's a little bit younger and more affected by devices. My son loves reading, and I can really credit him for instilling that passion within him. And I really appreciate that. Doesn't matter how I feel about him as a person, he gets the credit for that. Like, he helped raise our son in a positive way. So I think teaching other people to recognize those things that their ex brought to the table, whatever happened, they're still your child's parent. There's still something in there that you need to be able to dig up, to be able to talk about to professionals, and maybe at some point to your kids, that you appreciated about them, because that has to do with their own self-esteem, right?
Yes, and this is humanizing. What you're talking about is trying to get them to humanize the other parent. And I think there's a hesitation because there's been such a campaign to dehumanize the other parent. Because then that allows me, if I dehumanize someone, that allows me to put them all there, everything's
Mhm.
like if you look at any kind of warfare, right? That's the first thing, is we want to have a campaign of dehumanization that allows us to do terrible things to that people. This is the same thing here. If I dehumanize the other parent, then I can feel okay doing things that I wouldn't normally do, which are out of
Mm.
my character. So this thing that you're doing, and it's, I think that's a good portion of the work, is to try and we have to humanize the other parent, because there's got to be something in there. And this is a piece I don't want to get too far off here, but my experience working with the high conflict, especially when I've had a chance to meet with both parents, there's always two parts. There's a yin yang. So if you're going to sit there and go on this big tirade about how pathological your ex was and all these things, you have to recognize that you were with that person. So what does that say? You were with this person for a long period of time. So I would, don't say such bad things because you're really saying something about yourself in there for such a
Mhm,
long period of time. I think there's ways, like in a Gestalt way, where we can see different parts of people. And that's what, so Gestalt is this idea that you can see parts of a whole.
mhm,
And that's what we're talking about here. It's not going to serve us to say that anybody is all bad or all good. I think it's really more accurate to see, yes, there are these parts of this person that really were no longer in sync with the life that I wanted for our family. But there were some good parts of this person. And it's a shame because we have to lose them all. But that when we can see that, we could still engage because we're going to need to be able to engage with this parent for the rest of our child's lives.
mhm,
So I think it's really serves us to find those parts of that parent that we can see have value so that when we are at that wedding or the bar mitzvah or whatever we're going to, that we can say, and we can be in that same space and appreciate, even for a minute of a time, look, we're both here with our kid at this big milestone. Don't we want that? Otherwise, we're shooting ourselves in the foot.
mhm. Yeah. And again, it makes me think of it. That child is half of that other person. Like we have to
Yeah.
remember that.
And if we don't do this, we are missing out. We're throwing all of it out. We're saying, no, I don't want any of that. When in truth, poor parent doesn't want to be able to celebrate the milestones with the person who did bring this other person into our lives. For even wait, we're not. I don't think we're trying to fool ourselves into thinking that it's anything more than this. But at the very basic, if we can connect with those parts of the other person in a human way, we can we can move past this conflict stuff and actually have a little bit of a space for, and more importantly, for our kids to see, look, mom and dad can resolve our things here so we can be here for you at this very momentous occasion.
So it can be about the kid.
This should always be about the kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
If
Oh,
the kids
so
weren't here, we wouldn't be talking to each other.
right, right. Yeah, the part about humanizing and dehumanizing as a form of like war tactic. That's fascinating. I want to make sure before we run out of time that you talk about this roadmap that you came up with that you shared with me. If you, I know we can't like show it on screen, especially for people that are listening, but you called it the roadmap to understanding family dynamics and service interventions to mitigate risk for children of divorce. It's fascinating. Can you just like talk about a couple things in there that might help people in their
Sure.
own situations?
Well, let me just share. So this came out of my work with the Dutchess Family Courts, Westchester Family Courts. Uh, Over time, sorry about that.
No
Delete
problem.
that. So this came out of my work with various family courts, and there were patterns that emerged through that work over time. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to put something down in a visual form that can help everybody involved. Hopefully, this can help the attorneys, this can help each parent, any therapists involved, so that we understand that there is a course trajectory for what happens when there is a degree of conflict in the relationship. So it starts, and I hope this is a resource. Please put on your website or something, make it
Great.
easily
I was going to
accessible.
ask, like, can we share this?
It's a free resource, and there's lots of source articles at the back, so you can see that it's all supported by the evidence that's out there. So what we see is, when a couple decides that we're going to get a divorce, there's some degree of conflict, but it doesn't have to put any tension on the child. It can end there. We can do this amicably, and there's really good outcomes for that. In that case scenario, we have great co-parenting and great communication, and the child gets two loving families, and it's a wonderful thing. That's ideal, right? In
Yeah.
that situation, we made a
That's not
decision.
us, unfortunately.
But I want to say
Yeah.
that can be. For all
Yes.
of these cases, that can be, but it takes so much work. So what this does is it identifies some of the things that we're up against at
Mm,
each stage of this conflict scenario, and what we can do, appropriate interventions to help mitigate that and bring it back to this peak. So as we move forward, and in the visual, you'll see the tension between the parents continues to grow. And the tension in this starts to divide the child or children.
mhm,
They start to feel torn about which parent do I have to choose. And the scariest thing for a child, I just imagine for us, imagine if we believe that there were two gods and they were fighting over us and we can only choose one. It's that big for children. We are their world. So
mhm.
this idea that the two safest people that I'm most attached to in the world are fighting to the extent that I'm not going to be able to pick one. I don't no longer feel safe being able to pick one because if I pick this one, that one comes at me. If I pick this one, that comes at me. So it's a really horrible situation for the kid. And so how do they resolve this? They choose one. They choose one regardless of the attachment that they had. And when we see this happen, you know, it's a spontaneous disruption to the attachment system. A lot of the times it's baseless. I've worked with a kid. So tell me, how come you don't want to see your dad anymore? Well, when we were in third grade, he wouldn't let me get the box of crayons that I wanted. This is a kid who's like in fifth grade or something.
Hmm.
Okay, but I see all these pictures of you guys together on these vacations and you look happy and everything's going well. Yeah, no, we don't do that. Like there's a whole blocking out that happens and it's horrible because you're erasing history for this child, but it's in there. So for this, they resolve this by going with one parent, and then eventually that parent is phased out entirely, and that's where we see a parent go for full custody with no contact. And listen, maybe there's times again if the other parent is engaging in genuine harmless, harmful behavior, substance abuse, uh, other forms of abuse. Uh, Other mental health issues that are not being treated. I understand wanting to protect the child, but those cases are very rare. These kind of cases we see, we don't want them because the other parent, maybe they're kind of jerky or kind of, have some degree of pathology, but that's no reason. Like that's personality is so wide and so different. And we were with that person for so long, and this child has developed a relationship with this person for so long, and actually does more harm to remove that than to help that child learn how to have a relationship with it. And we're not perfect either. So it's
Hmm.
helpful for that child to learn how to have relationships with different people. This will help them much greater in life because they're going to come into contact with people who are maybe a little bit different or a little bit difficult. But we have to learn how to have relationships with them, functional relationships with them too. So by doing this, we're cutting out all out, and we're looking to see later on in life where there's going to be a high degree of issues coming up. So this, if you look at the roadmap, as I said, it offers the natural course of this. It also offers an outline of the progress of treatment. So maybe what interventions we would do when we're seeing what's going on in terms of the progression through uh, finding courts, getting into court, uh, court orders being made, and multiple petitions. And as time goes on, how it progresses. Well, there are interventions that are more effective or less effective at different stages. So it's useful to look at this and for, I'm going to say, the whole collaborative team. So this would be the therapist, this would be the law guardian, hopefully even the attorneys to be able to support interventions at the right phase so that so it works. Because we try and do something and it's not the right spot, we're just, again, we're interacting with something other than it is, and that's always going to be.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm very excited to be able to share it because I remember looking at it for the first time and going, "Oh, this is amazing." So thanks for creating it and just the list of all of the articles and experts that were involved. I see it was a lot of work going into this. Okay, so just before we close, are there any other tips that parents can do? So certainly we'll take a look at that document, but just off the top of your head, like what I should do right now if I feel like I'm either heading for a divorce or I'm in the middle of something and my kid is suffering. Like, what can I do myself?
That's great. I'm going to say, look at your child, like truly, like take a break for a minute. Whatever your kid's doing, let them be what they're doing, but just look at them with the eyes of love and future. Think about your child and what's going to serve them as they get older. Like truly try to think about their relationships potentially that they're going to find, a partner, that they're going to go for jobs and need to function with other people. Think about these things when you're looking at your child and operate from there, operate from love. And anytime, one other thing I would say, anytime you find yourself having anger or hurt from the other partner, snap that rubber band so that we can think, okay, I need to find love for my child again. Because that anger, it's not going to serve you, right?
Mm,
If we're wrong at this point, there's courts involved. That's the place for it. It will serve you to channel the love for your child in your approach. So I think that that's what I would offer for parents is really just try and focus on your kid and what you really believe is going to help them grow as an individual, regardless, separate from the other person. Let them have the other outside. Again, all of this is outside the rare cases where there's significant abuse, etc. To truly support that child and having a relationship with the other person. I think it's hard, but that's the work.
yeah, I mean that, like you said, that's the basis for all their relationships
Yeah.
and helping them learn to navigate conflict independently and help them learn to advocate for themselves independently. And that's something we tell our clients all the time too, is that your kid, you cannot just say, I'm going to try to take all the custody away and have this bubble around the child, because the child's going to become a grown up. How are they going to learn to deal with other difficult people in the world? Like, this is actually an opportunity to teach them, how do you deal with it? Like, let's figure it out together.
Yes, it doesn't happen just this external checklist of things that we could do. It really has to happen internally for us
Mhm.
to have it manifest correctly.
Yeah. Ah, well, thank you so much, Adam. And how can people find you or find any of your offices?
They can go online. We're in New York State, so if you just Google hitrd.com, headintherightdirection.com, you can go to our website. There's lots of ways to access. We've got profiles on Help, et cetera, but reach out to us, and if we can help you out, we certainly will.
Great. All right. Thank you so much, and we'll stay in touch for sure.
Lisa, thank you so much for this opportunity.
You're welcome.